It's a great pleasure and privilege to be with you today to talk to you about how we find soul in the age of anger. And if you think that sounds like an esoteric pursuit, I assure you it's not. It's very practical and might even be essential to navigate these times in which we find ourselves. Now, as I try to convince you of that contention, I'd like to invite you to hold a question for me in your mind. What is the story of the life you are living right now? And is that story the fullest expression of your unique genius, your deepest sense of meaning and purpose and identity? I'll return to that question in a few minutes. The US presidential election last year was nothing less than a political earthquake. And ever since, it's become popular to speak of the age of Trump. I get the sentiment, but the catchphrase misses a larger and much more compelling point. Modern Western culture has been racing toward a psychological and spiritual crisis for many years, a crisis that is much bigger than the election of Donald Trump. It's more appropriate, in fact, to speak of an age of anger and how we not only survive it, but how we dare to find soul within it. Today, I want to talk about the real causes of the anger that we see around us, and how we transform the energy of that anger into a personal and social reinvention. So let's get to it. Globalization promised to lift billions across the world into the middle class, instill democratic values, dissolve religious and ethnic tensions. To suggest that that massive experiment in social engineering has under-delivered is, I think, to perfect the art of understatement. There may be more wealth in the world today than ever before, but there's more inequity, more tyranny, and the costs of that wealth creation are staggeringly high. People consumed in the fires of materialism, individualism, hypercompetition, overcomplication, overwork, and massive amounts of debt. And anger, expressed in a variety of ways. Anxiety, worry, confusion, burnout. Anger is the result. This is what we see in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. Conventional wisdom would hold that most of these people are depressed. That's not true. Antidepressant drugs have a less than 30% success rate, precisely because the majority of people with a diagnosis of depression, they're actually suffering from something else: demoralization, a condition unresponsive to drugs. There's no easy, quick, medicated fix here. Demoralization is to take away someone's spirit, their courage, to destroy their morale. Historically, this was applied to very specific situations: diagnosis of a terminal illness, survival in a prisoner of war camp, for example. But there is a cultural variety that is expressing itself right now as a psychological and spiritual crisis in which seemingly normal people like you and me begin to question the assumptions underlying the way we live, work, and play. And in particular, our allegiance to materialism, consumerism, and the market. The resulting feeling of being forsaken, on the wrong life path, is commonly seen to be depression, but it's actually demoralization. I speak from experience. For most of my professional career, I've been self-employed as a management consultant. I saw myself as a hotshot. I went to the airport on Sunday afternoon, returned Thursday night, boasted about the places I'd been, the work I was doing. I was well paid, and I spent most of what I earned on beautiful things: homes, clothes, vacations, material things that I wore as a badge of honor. They were the markers of my identity and my success, my membership in a very particular tribe. One day, my largest and most important client terminated my retainer. Interestingly, at the same time, all of my other work disappeared too. I wasn't worried. I'm a talented and resilient guy, and there's always been somebody ready to hire me. Not this time. There was no new work to replace the old, and no income. I kept the fear at bay initially with a financial cushion I'd set aside, but I burned through that pretty quickly. And I began to notice some pretty disturbing things about me and the life I'd been living. The levels of real intimacy, trust, and friendship in my life, shockingly low. I've been sleepwalking through my life, materially successful, but emotionally adrift from myself and others. And I also had to own the fact that I was susceptible to lying, hiding, not being open or transparent with the people in my life, a manipulator. And I was especially susceptible to the siren call of advertising. I bought all kinds of shit I didn't need, but it made me feel good for a while. I called it retail therapy. Perhaps a few of you can relate to the notion of retail therapy. As time went on and no new work appeared, the fear and the anger really started to assert itself. Why is this happening to me? How long can I last? What will I do if I can't get work? And most especially for my purposes here today, who am I in the absence of the work that has defined me and the material possessions that work has enabled me to buy? At arguably my lowest and most demoralized level, I found myself one winter day walking deeper and deeper into a snowstorm. And for reasons I can't explain rationally, I looked up to this gray vault of sky. At the precise moment, 4 ravens flew low over my head in beautiful, exquisite formation, seemingly oblivious to the blizzard, beckoning me to follow. It spurred a quiet moment of reflection. And yes, reinvention. I decided in that moment to stop toggling between self-pity, confusion, and anger, and to begin looking deeply within myself, beneath my personality or persona, beneath the golden mask that I had worn all these years. I began to see if I could perhaps connect with my deepest sense of purpose and meaning and identity, if I could connect with my soul. Carl Jung describes this as the integration of the unconscious into consciousness. The poet Mary Oliver speaks to it as the impulse to stride deeper and deeper into the world that is in here. Whatever you call it. I found that as I began to live from this place of expanding awareness, I noticed some things. I began to form relationships of real substance and depth, sincerity and authenticity. My decision-making wasn't coming from the longings or wants of my ego, but from some other part of me that was connected to something outside of me, something bigger than me. And maybe most importantly, I learned that the life I'd been living, while materially attractive, was too small for my true nature. And so my life and my work has been reimagined, reinvented, and redirected towards cultivating the soulful awareness and aliveness of myself and others. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. What is Rob smoking? Soulful awareness and aliveness? That's kind of flaky. Surely not relevant for the serious work I do in the world. Well, let me ask you this. How's that mainstream status quo stuff working for you? Overcomplication, overwork, hurriedness, debt? There's another path. It's a soulful path. And the beauty is that we all have access to it. Soul is the basis of our consciousness. Soul is the fundamental building block of biology, the fundamental unit of all living beings. Soul is expressed in attachment, in love, in community. If you've ever stood on the edge of an ocean or the middle of a forest, calmed your mind, and listened deeply to the alchemical changes that are happening in your body, you've started to connect with your soul. We've all got it. We've lost it or forgotten about it as we became slaves to the dollar, but we've got it. And at this moment in history, at a time when the world seems more illegible than ever before, we need to call forth the truest, most mature, most soulful versions of ourselves. What might each of you carry that is invisible to others, but is nonetheless essential to your life, the lives of your family, the lives in your community? What might you carry? If we can begin to show up in the world from this place, from a place of soulful awareness and aliveness, a place where we're not slaves to our ego, where we're mindful of civility and citizenship and a higher purpose, where we remember ourselves as part of a collective, we become the authors, the architects, the creators of the most extraordinary story for ourselves and the communities of which we're a part. We also, incidentally, we become the antidote to the age of anger. So I want to return now to that question I asked you to hold in your minds. What is the story of your life that you're living right now? And is that the fullest expression of your unique meaning, purpose, and identity? And my recommendation to you, my call to action for all of you, is to create some quiet time in your busy lives. It only takes a few moments. But create some quiet time. It can be in nature, perhaps, but it doesn't have to be. The critical thing is that you create some quiet time and do 3 things that will help you answer that question. Number 1, Ask yourself how much of your identity is tied up in your job or your job title or your material stuff. And consider whether there's something deeper that might be missing. Number 2, feel into the levels of real intimacy and friendship and trust in your life. Is it there? Does it feel genuine? Can you imagine something even more expansive? And 3, dare to take that step across the threshold and begin looking beneath your personality, your persona, your vocation, and see if you can't begin to connect with that deeper purpose and meaning. That unique soul gift that you alone possess, that gift that is invisible to others, but that you can carry into the world. If we do this, we not only survive the age of anger, we find soul in the age of anger, and we author a personal and social reinvention. And that's an idea worth spreading. Thank you.